Have you ever been told you're too nice in relationships? You go out of your way to be kind, accommodating, and selfless, only to end up feeling unappreciated, drained, or even taken advantage of. What if your kindness isn't just a virtue, but a silent trap? What if being too nice is secretly sabotaging your love life, eroding your self-worth, and keeping you stuck in unfulfilling relationships? We often hear that kindness is one of the greatest qualities a person can have, and it is. But there's a hidden side to excessive niceness, one that psychology, particularly the work of Carl Jung, helps us understand. Jung, the founder of analytical psychology, revealed how our unconscious patterns shape our relationships. One of the most damaging of these patterns is the compulsive need to be nice, not out of genuine love, but out of fear, insecurity, or a desperate need for approval. When we're too nice, we suppress our true feelings, avoid conflict at all costs, and let others cross our boundaries, all in the name of keeping the peace. But Jung warned that what we repress doesn't disappear. It festers in the shadow, the part of our psyche that holds everything we deny about ourselves. Unexpressed anger turns into resentment. Unspoken needs lead to emotional exhaustion. And the more we play the role of the perfect partner, the more we attract people who exploit our kindness or dismiss our worth. Carl Jung's groundbreaking work in analytical psychology reveals that our personalities are far more complex than the face we show to the world. One of his most illuminating concepts is the interplay between the persona and the shadow, two forces constantly at work beneath the surface of our behavior. The persona is the carefully crafted mask we wear in social situations, the version of ourselves we believe is acceptable, even admirable. For many, this mask takes the form of the eternally kind, endlessly accommodating person, someone who never rocks the boat, never says no, and prioritizes others' comfort over their own needs. But Jung warns that this exaggerated niceness often comes at a steep cost. What lies beneath that polished exterior is the shadow, the repressed, denied, or hidden aspects of ourselves that we refuse to acknowledge. For the chronically nice person, the shadow often contains anger, assertiveness, and healthy selfishness, traits deemed unacceptable either by society or by their own internalized beliefs. The more someone suppresses these qualities to maintain their good person image, the more those emotions fester in the dark, eventually erupting in unexpected ways: passive aggression, emotional withdrawal, or even sudden, disproportionate outbursts that leave everyone, including themselves, shocked. This suppression doesn't happen in a vacuum. Many people who struggle with excessive niceness are unconsciously driven by what we might call the pleaser archetype, a deeply ingrained pattern of behavior rooted in fear rather than genuine compassion. Beneath the surface of their constant giving lies a terror of rejection, a fear that if they stop being useful, agreeable, or endlessly patient, they'll be abandoned or deemed unworthy of love. Often, this pattern stems from childhood experiences. Perhaps they learned early on that love was conditional, that their worth depended on how little they demanded, how quietly they endured. Jung's concept of projection further complicates this dynamic. When we lack self-validation, we unconsciously seek it from others, projecting our need for approval onto partners, friends, or authority figures. We hand them the power to define our value, turning relationships into transactions. If I give enough, if I make myself indispensable, then maybe they'll stay. But this isn't love. It's a form of emotional bargaining, one that leaves the giver depleted and the receiver often oblivious to the hidden debt being accrued. Perhaps one of the most insidious twists in this dynamic is the way excessive niceness can masquerade as spiritual or moral superiority. Many people fall into the trap of believing that true kindness means never setting boundaries, never expressing anger, never prioritizing themselves. They confuse self-erasure with enlightenment, telling themselves that their suffering is a sign of virtue. But Jung would argue that this is a dangerous illusion, what psychologists now call spiritual bypassing. Real growth isn't about transcending human emotions like anger or need, it's about integrating them. When we refuse to acknowledge our own limits, when we pretend conflict doesn't exist, we don't become more loving, we become more dishonest. Resentment builds in the gaps of unspoken truths, and the very relationships we sought to preserve with our silence become poisoned by unaddressed tensions. The nice person who never complains is often the one who eventually explodes, leaving their partners bewildered. Where did this come from? But the answer lies in the shadow, the part of them they refused to let speak until it could no longer be ignored. This is the paradox at the heart of excessive niceness. The more we try to avoid conflict by silencing our true selves, the more conflict we ultimately create. The persona grows heavier, the shadow grows louder, and the very traits we disowned, anger, assertiveness, the capacity to say no, return with a force that can feel foreign and frightening. Jung's work invites us to ask a difficult but liberating question. What if the kindest thing we can do, for ourselves and for others, is to stop being so nice? Not to become cruel, but to become real. To trade the exhausting performance of perfection for the messy, authentic humanity that actually makes love possible. Because relationships built on suppression aren't relationships, they're performances. And no one can truly love a mask. The tragic irony of being excessively nice in relationships is that it often attracts the very people who will exploit that kindness most ruthlessly. Narcissists, emotional manipulators, and chronically selfish partners have a radar for those with weak boundaries. They can sense the unspoken willingness to tolerate disrespect, the desperate need to please, the fear of confrontation that makes their targets easy to control. These predators don't seek out kind people. They seek out people who confuse kindness with self-sacrifice, who have been conditioned to believe love means enduring mistreatment with a smile. Jung's concept of the anima and animus, the unconscious feminine and masculine aspects within each of us, helps explain why this happens. When we haven't fully integrated these aspects within ourselves, we project them outward, idealizing partners who seem to embody the strength, confidence, or passion we've suppressed in ourselves. The nice person falls hardest for the charismatic but callous partner, mistaking their own unexpressed fire for the other's authenticity. What feels like love is often just enchantment with a mirror, one that eventually shatters, leaving them to wonder how they gave so much to someone who gave so little in return. This dynamic sets the stage for one of the most corrosive forces in any relationship, the slow burn of resentment. When anger is consistently swallowed rather than expressed, it doesn't disappear, it metastasizes. The partner who always says it's fine when it's not, who bites their tongue during every unfair argument, who smiles through their disappointment is building a hidden archive of grievances. Jung's shadow theory explains this perfectly. What we refuse to acknowledge in ourselves doesn't vanish, it gathers power in the darkness. We've all seen the aftermath, the normally placid partner who suddenly erupts over a minor offense, the perfect spouse who one day walks out without warning, leaving their bewildered partner asking, "But you never complained." These aren't overreactions. They're the inevitable result of a lifetime of self-silencing. The explosion was always coming. The only surprise is which straw finally breaks the camel's back. Perhaps the greatest casualty of chronic niceness is the loss of one's authentic self. Every time we say yes when we mean no, every time we laugh off an insult that stung, every time we pretend we don't have needs to avoid being difficult, we're not preserving harmony, we're erasing ourselves. Jung distinguished between the false self, the adapted, socially acceptable persona, and the true self, the unfiltered, complete being we're meant to become. Relationships built on the false self are doomed from the start, not because they lack love, but because they lack truth. No amount of affection can compensate for the soul sickness of constant self-betrayal. This is why so many nice people eventually find themselves in relationships that feel empty despite being outwardly perfect, why they wake up one day next to someone who doesn't truly know them, because they've never dared to show who they really are. The tragedy isn't that their partner failed to see them, it's that they never gave their partner the chance. The unspoken contract of the too nice relationship, "I'll never inconvenience you with my truth if you'll never leave me for it," creates a bond that's comfortable but ultimately counterfeit. Real intimacy requires the risk of displeasure, the courage to say, "This hurt me," instead of, "It's okay," the willingness to be loved for who you are rather than who you pretend to be. Without this raw honesty, relationships become beautifully decorated facades, impressive to outsiders, hollow to those trapped inside. The paradox is that what feels like relationship preservation through niceness is actually relationship sabotage. By refusing to bring our full humanity, needs, boundaries, flaws, and all to our connections, we're not protecting them, we're preventing them from ever becoming real. The journey from compulsive niceness to authentic relating begins with what Jung called shadow work, the courageous process of reclaiming the disowned parts of ourselves. For the chronic people-pleaser, this means making peace with the very traits they've spent a lifetime suppressing: anger, selfishness, and healthy aggression. These aren't flaws to be eradicated, but vital energies that have been demonized. Anger, when expressed consciously, becomes the force that protects our boundaries. Selfishness, in proper measure, transforms into self-care that makes us better partners. The first step is noticing where we've been too passive, those moments when we swallowed our truth to keep the peace. Powerful journaling prompts can illuminate these patterns. When did I last say yes when I meant no? What childhood message made me believe my needs were burdensome? If I weren't afraid of being abandoned, what would I stop tolerating tomorrow? This isn't about cultivating hostility, but about restoring balance, recognizing that real kindness includes being kind to oneself. As we reintegrate these shadow elements, we naturally arrive at Jung's concept of individuation, the process of becoming a complete, undivided self rather than a collection of adaptations to others' expectations. This is where boundary setting transforms from a terrifying prospect to a sacred act of self-honor. Many fear that boundaries will make them unlovable, when in truth, they're the prerequisite for being loved authentically. Practical scripts can help bridge the gap between theory and action. I can't continue this conversation when voices are raised. Let's pause and revisit when we're calmer, or, I want to support you, but I need to prioritize my energy right now. These statements aren't rejections but revelations. They give others the gift of knowing the real you rather than the exhausted caretaker you've been pretending to be. The guilt that arises isn't a sign you're doing something wrong, but evidence of how deeply you've internalized the belief that your worth depends on your utility to others. The final frontier is perhaps the most challenging yet transformative, learning to see conflict as the crucible of intimacy rather than its destroyer. Jung's concept of Konjunktio, the alchemical marriage of opposites, shows us that true connection isn't born from perfect harmony, but from the tension and resolution of differences. Relationships either grow through constructive conflict or stagnate through artificial peace. The key lies in shifting our terror of abandonment into what psychologist David Richo calls loving what is, the willingness to risk temporary discomfort for lasting authenticity. This means practicing statements like, "I see this differently," without apologizing for your perspective, or, "When you do X, I feel Y," without immediately cushioning it with, "But it's probably my fault." Each time we survive a disagreement without collapsing or compromising our core, we rewrite the old story that love requires self-erasure. The miracle is discovering that the people truly meant for us won't love us less for being whole, they'll love us more for finally showing up. This transformation from pathological niceness to grounded authenticity isn't about becoming someone new, but returning to who you were before the world convinced you to shrink. It's realizing that the love which demands your disappearance isn't love at all, and that the relationships worth keeping are those that can withstand and grow from your occasional no. Jung's wisdom reminds us that wholeness, not perfection, is the goal. The moments when you honor your anger, voice your need, or stand your ground aren't relationship failures. They're the first tremors of your soul returning home. At the heart of Jung's teachings lies a profound truth. Niceness isn't love if it costs you your self-respect. What begins as a virtue, kindness, generosity, patience, can curdle into self-betrayal when given from an empty cup. We've explored how excessive niceness isn't merely a personality trait, but often a survival strategy, one that attracts the wrong partners, breeds resentment, and suffocates authenticity. Yet the solution isn't to swing toward cold indifference, but to find the balance where compassion includes yourself. Real love doesn't demand your silence, it thrives on your truth. As we close, consider this. Which of these patterns do you recognize in yourself? Have you ever swallowed your anger to keep the peace? Have you ever felt like the nice one in your relationships, only to end up feeling invisible? Share your experiences below, because the first step toward change is awareness, and you're not alone in this struggle. And if you found this exploration of Jungian psychology illuminating, stay tuned. Next time, we'll dive deeper into how these dynamics play out with toxic partners. We'll unpack how to spot a narcissist using Jungian psychology, revealing why certain personalities are drawn to empathic, accommodating people, and how to break free from their grip. Until then, remember, the goal isn't to be perfect. It's to be whole.